What's up, everyone? I'm here at my NFL Week 6 DraftKings picks. Now, before we get into the video, there's two things I want to mention really quickly. Number one, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, so I apologize for not doing a recap video like I was planning on doing every Tuesday from now on. Hopefully, I can get back to that next week. Also, I want to mention that I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who subscribed and is liking the videos and leaving good comments. I've gained like over 400 plus subscribers since I started doing these style videos. I've only been doing it for a few weeks now. So, I already had a couple hundred subscribers when I started this, but, you guys have just been great so far. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the recap and then we'll get into the main picks. Okay, so week 5 wasn't a terrible week for me. I definitely had some major letdowns at guys that I felt really good about. And then I also had some really good picks in the running back position and some other sleeper plays. So, as far as the wide receiver position goes, that's the one position that I really missed this week. Jordy, Jarvis, and Julian, so I guess the Triple J really let me down. Nelson, it was just kind of a product of where, he was moving the ball. Really, Jordy Nelson and Julian Edelman was really just a product of their quarterback moving the ball around a lot. Jarvis Landry was really just a situation where the whole team just played bad. Ryan Tannehill wasn't getting any protection. He couldn't get the ball off. But even then, there's no excuse to have Jarvis Landry only with 3 receptions on 3 targets. I think that's the first time in like 10 plus games. Maybe not quite that many games, but it's been a long time since Jarvis Landry hasn't had at least 7 receptions and 10 plus targets. So this coming week, he's definitely going to see double-digit targets. I can bank on that for sure. Some other guys that I liked was Sammy Coates. I gave him out in my value picks video. I liked him a lot. He ended up having a great game. I mean, I think like the first drive for the Steelers, he had a 72-yard touchdown, and that play alone put 14 points up. So even if he did nothing the rest of the game, he would have been worth it at 46 or 3,600, excuse me. So some other guys had a good game. Cooper, Brady. I mean, the running backs were pretty good for me this week. Jordan Howard, Theo Riddick, and DeMarco were all able to put up at least 20 points or so. So, it's just one of those weeks where I had the majority of the players do well, but I just really wasn't able to piece together that one lineup. Okay, so moving into some Week 6 stacks now. The first two guys I want to talk about are Russell Wilson and Doug Baldwin. Now, these two guys are in a really good spot here. First off, we have to talk about Russell Wilson. I mean, Russell Wilson, he's been hindered by this knee injury for a few weeks now, and he's had an extra week to heal up now. So he's had 2 weeks. He's going to be playing with his knee brace still. I'm sure he's still going to be on the final injury report because he doesn't seem like he's 100% yet. But last week was definitely the best game of the season for him. He threw for over 300 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, put up 26 points. This looks like it's another good spot for him. He's going up against the Atlanta Falcons at home, coming off a bye. The Falcons are actually a much better rush defense than they are a pass defense. So this is actually good for us because that means obviously they're going to be having to throw the ball a lot more, if they're not able to run the ball, the Seahawks are. So, he's a reasonable price. As far as Doug Baldwin goes, Doug Baldwin is kind of a boom or bust player. He has some games with 164 receiving yards this season, and then he has another with 20 yards. Now, that game was actually against the LA Rams, I believe. Doug Baldwin actually had a little bit of an injury in that game as well, but he seems to be fine. So I like the situation for both of these guys. I don't really know what the ceiling is. I don't know how popular they're going to be. But I think, anytime you can get a team coming off a bye with a quarterback who hasn't been 100%, that's going to give him more time to rest. And, they have a wide receiver who's a little bit underrated. He's not priced probably where he should be right now. He's at 6,500, I believe it is. Yeah, 6,500. So I like this as kind of like a sleeper stack. I'm going to say it's a sleeper. But again, I haven't really got a good gauge on what people are thinking. But right now, I think both of these guys have really good potential to put easily over 25 points plus for each of them. Okay, so my next stack is Marcus Mariota and Delanie Walker. Now, this is a little bit different than what I usually do. I'll usually give you the quarterback and the wide receiver and just mention that I like that particular team's tight end. But in this particular case, Mariota with Delanie Walker makes 100% the most sense out of any of those other pass catchers on that team. The matchup is just great. I mean, you can't get much of a better matchup. I mean, the Browns are coming off of a terrible, terrible game against the Patriots, which we all kind of expected. I mean, let's be realistic about it. And, the Browns have now, because of that game, the Browns have allowed more receptions and more receiving yards than any other team in the NFL to opposing tight ends. They've allowed 43 receptions and 500 receiving yards. Now, again, these numbers can be a bit skewed because of this, horrendous game they had against The Patriots, I believe they gave like 200 receiving yards alone to tight ends in that game. So yes, it can be a little bit skewed, but all in all, I think that they're just bad against tight ends. They're vulnerable to that. Marcus Mariota loves to throw to Delanie Walker. He throws to his tight end almost more than anybody else in the entire NFL. And Mariota now has rushing upside. Last week, Mariota, second most rushing yards and the second most rushing attempts that he's had in the past 16 games. He had 7 rushing attempts for 60 rushing yards. Not a ton, but, if this is something that they're going to look to do more and more, get him involved in the ground game, he's going to gain a lot of value. And at just $6,100 this week, Mariota is a guy that I like a lot. And I think it could be a popular play for Mariota. I'm not sure so much about Walker, but honestly, I like both these guys. Walker's not a great price at $5,500, but there's not a ton of value at the tight end position as we speak. So I like both of these guys a lot, and I think they could be low owned. Okay, so for my third and final stack, I have Cam Newton and Kelvin Benjamin. Now at $8,100 a piece, this is definitely the most expensive stack that I've shared so far. And this is kind of a tough situation to kind of gauge because it's such a good matchup for these two guys, but they haven't played well this season, the Panthers as a whole. Cam Newton's coming off an injury. Kelvin didn't play that well, even though he played a crappy defense against the Buccaneers last week. So I mean, it's tough. I still think it's going to be a highly owned stack. I mean, it's Cam Newton. He's facing the Saints. He shredded the Saints a lot of times in his career. The Saints are terrible on defense, as pretty much everybody in the NFL knows by this point. The Saints are allowing 40.9 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers as a whole, which is horrendous. The Saints are allowing over 300 passing yards per game. So, I mean, the Panthers are going to get back Cam Newton. Jonathan Stewart's coming back. And we're assuming Cam Newton's coming back for the record. We don't know for a fact he's coming back, but it looks like it's pointing to the direction that he will. Michael Orr may even come back. That's a big addition. He's not a great big bump up to the left tackle spot, but he's better than what the Panthers have had, which has been probably the biggest struggle for the Panthers this season as far as pass protection. So, I like Cam and Kelvin. I think a lot of people are going to be on Greg because he's coming off that career game. Even though Greg Olsen is $7,000, he's still $1,100 cheaper than Kelvin. So, I like this stack right here. If you want to go on the Saints side of the ball, I completely understand that. The Panthers have been, really bad on defense as well. They let go of Ben-Wickery, which was a completely, massive mistake in my opinion. But the thing is, if the Panthers are going to do well, if the Panthers are going to put up a bunch of points on offense and Cam Newton's playing, it's probably going to be through 3 guys. It's going to be through Cam, it's going to be through Kelvin, it's going to be through Greg Olsen. Whereas on the Saints side of the ball, you could see any number of guys, put up huge, big numbers. It could be, with Breeze. So I think Cam is easier to stack. With Breeze, you could see, Cooks, you could see Snead, even Fleener has a potential. We'll see. The reason I don't like Jonathan Stewart in this particular situation, even though he's coming back, is because Cam steals his goal line touches a lot of times. He doesn't catch passes. I'm not really sure what his price is, and I may toss him in a lineup or two, but I definitely want to go with the pass-catching options with Cam in this particular situation. So I definitely like this game. There's no line out for it in Vegas right now because Cam hasn't been declared, in or out. So when the line finally comes out for this game, I would expect it to be over 50. But I like Cam Newton and Kelvin. It definitely 100% makes sense to have Greg in there as well. So don't be afraid to play anybody on either side of the ball here. All right, moving into some running backs, and the first guy I want to talk about is by far the most obvious play of the week, in my opinion, and that's LeVeon Bell. He's pricey at $7,900, but if you want a piece of this game, LeVeon Bell makes the absolute most sense. I mean, Antonio Brown is $10,000 this week. $10,000. That is absolutely absurd. So if you want to get some pieces of this game, the Steelers' offense against this Miami defense, LeVeon Bell is, like I said, the obvious play for multiple reasons. Okay, so first off, Miami is allowing 400 total yards of offense per game. That's 5th worst in the NFL. But not only that, they are the worst rushing defense in the NFL right now, allowing 150.8 rushing yards per game. LeVeon Bell is going to be licking his chops this game. Add in the fact that he has 17 targets. That's right. LeVeon Bell has 17 targets in his first 2 games. He has yet to score a touchdown, and he still put up over 20 points in both of his first 2 games of this season that he's actually played. So, You definitely have to have LeVeon Bell in a cash game lineup this week. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Put him in the lineup. Don't think twice about it. Don't try to get too cute. Put LeVeon Bell in your lineup and just start thinking about who else you're going to put in there, because Bell has to be in a cash game lineup this week. 100%. Okay, so next up I have LeSean McCoy, and he has just as good of a matchup against the San Francisco 49ers as Le'Veon Bell does against the Miami Dolphins. The 49ers are the second worst rushing defense in the NFL. Only the Miami Dolphins, like I mentioned just a second ago, are worse. 49ers are giving up about 146.8 rushing yards per game. You know, San Francisco has allowed 665 rushing yards this season, and that's actually the most in the NFL. So, McCoy, too, is licking his chops just like Le'Veon is. McCoy has 21 targets this season, and he has 19 receptions. That's incredible. Only 2 incompletions his way, so that's huge. Also, 12 of the 21 targets he's had this season have come after Sammy Watkins has gone out with that, on the injury reserve. And I think it was, an ankle injury, I believe it was, some kind of foot injury. So, obviously, without Sammy Watkins, they're looking to get him involved in the pass game. So that's huge. That means that LeSean McCoy is not game flow dependent. And what I mean by that is, if the Bills get up in this game big or something, whatever happens, they're going to run the ball, and McCoy is still going to get his touches. If they get down in this game and they have to start passing it, McCoy is still going to get his targets and he's going to get his receptions. On average, McCoy has the football in his hands 20.8 times per game, which is actually really, really good. So, he's getting a lot of touches per game. Like I said, he's not game flow dependent. He's $1,000 cheaper than Le'Veon. These two guys right here you see on your screen very well will probably be my 2 main cash game running backs this week, because this looks like a week where you got to pay up at running back and you need to kind of find some cheap value plays at the wide receiver position. All right, last but not least is Jordan Howard, and this is a guy that I've mentioned for the 3rd straight week in a row now. And again, his price is creeping up, obviously, and probably by this time next week he'll probably be a little bit too expensive to play. But right now, Howard is still a really good price at $6,200. He's had 100 rushing yards in both of the games that he started this season. He outsnapped Kadeem Carey 63-2 last week. 63-2. So that means that Jordan Howard is the number 1 back. He's going to get all the carries no matter what, just about. So Howard is the guy in the Chicago Bears offense now at the running back spot. So that's a big, big plus. Jacksonville is an average rushing defense. They're allowing over 100 rushing yards per game. They rank 17th. They rank 17th in the NFL. So, they're not really good at anything, but, rushing defense, they're not really that good at it either. So Howard always has that PPR bonus. He actually hasn't got as many receptions as I thought he would get. I think in the first 2 weeks, he's only had 3 receptions in both games. But last week, I believe he had a receiving touchdown. So, Howard, again, he's a good play. I think that the other 2 guys that I mentioned earlier are much better plays this week. But again, you may need to spend down just a little bit so you can get a little bit more salary left over to spend on wide receivers. So it really just depends. I haven't actually started building lineups yet, but these are definitely 3 running backs that I'm really looking at a lot this week. Okay, so moving into some wide receivers now. The first guy that I have down is Jeremy Maclin. And it's really interesting situation for Maclin, because Maclin's not a guy who's going to put up a ton of points. He rarely puts up over 20, 25 plus points. Sometimes he can flirt with a 20-point marker or so. But he's a guy who's always going to get you 10 to 12 fantasy points no matter what. And this is actually a really, really good spot for him. He's facing the Oakland defense, which is allowing 330.6 passing yards per game, which is absolutely horrendous. So, Alex Smith and Jeremy Maclin is actually maybe a sneaky, probably not even that sneaky, honestly, considering they're facing the worst passing defense in the NFL, like I just mentioned. But, maybe a lot of people won't be looking the way of Alex Smith. So, but I like Maclin. He's not a bad price. And, they're coming off a bye week. Andy Reid has historically been incredible coming off the bye weeks. He's averaging 7 targets per game in the past 16 regular season games. And like I've already mentioned, Maclin has a safe floor. He's pretty much a lock for 10 to 12 points. So if you're looking for like a big score in a tournament or something like that, Maclin probably isn't the way to look. This week he probably has, a higher upside than he usually would because he's facing such a poor defense. But I think Maclin is a really good option in cash games just because he's a safe play. I'll have to see what happens later in the week. Also, I want to mention, and this is really, really key, keep tabs on Jamal Charles. Jamal Charles is practicing so far this week. If we find out that Jamal Charles is going to be a full go and he's going to play, 75, +% of the snaps, I may not like Maclin, because that means that the Chiefs are going to run the ball a lot. They're going to try to get, obviously they're going to try to get Charles involved in the pass game as well, because that's where he's deadly as well. So I may not like Maclin as much if Jamal Charles plays. And if Jamal Charles does play, I probably won't play Maclin in cash games. So we'll just have to see what happens. But right now, I do like Maclin. Okay, so next up I have Allen Robinson. Now, if you guys have been following these videos for at least a little while now, you should know that I'm a pretty big Allen Robinson fan. I think that he's a great wide receiver. I think sometimes that the Jaguar supporting cast doesn't really let him show his full potential and talent, but this week seems to be a good matchup for him. I mean, so far he's picked it up a little bit in the past couple weeks. I mean, the Jaguars are coming off a bye week. In the past 2 weeks, Allen Robinson has actually had, or the past 2 games, I should say, Allen Robinson has 21 targets and 3 receiving touchdowns. And coming off that bye week, they have a lot of time to prepare for Chicago, I believe it is, who they're playing. So I like this matchup a lot. Something else that I want to point out is that the Jags have little to no run game right now. They are 30th in the NFL in rushing yards per game. That's just 75.2. So this means they're going to obviously have to be throwing the ball a lot. So if you want to go a Blake Bortles, Allen Robinson stack, again, I love going with that stack. Blake Bortles is a garbage time hero, like seriously. So I like Allen Robinson a lot. Hopefully it's not going to turn into an Allen Hurns game, but right now I think Robinson is a really good play. Okay, so last up for the wide receiver position is Will Fuller. And this is a guy that I'm really, really intrigued by, because he's facing off against the Indianapolis Colts, and Vontae Davis is going to be covering DeAndre Hopkins. Now, over the past few seasons, we've seen this particular situation happen where the number 1 receiver will get shadowed by Vontae Davis, and the number 2 receiver or some secondary receiver will have a big game. Well, so far this season, Will Fuller has put up just as good numbers as DeAndre Hopkins. And, Will Fuller is obviously a significant discount at $5,900 compared to $7,500 for DeAndre. And, Will Fuller's coming off a really bad game against Minnesota. Again, Minnesota's a great defense. They were just outmatched, and, Will Fuller was, like I said, he was no match. So I don't think he's going to have a lot of ownership. I think this is a really good spot for him. I love the price. Like I said, I think he's a great tournament option. And again, at a spot where you may need some savings in the wide receiver position this week, he may even be a somewhat viable cash game play. I haven't decided that yet or not, but I just like him a lot. I think a lot of people are going to be overlooking Lamar Miller as well. I just kind of want to mention it. I've mentioned this a couple times in previous videos so far this season, and that the Colts are very vulnerable against the receiving running back. Well, Lamar Miller is just that. He's a guy he's a dual threat running back. He'll get involved in the pass game. He'll run the ball on the ground. So I just kind of wanted to mention that as well. So, it very well could be a little sneaky Brock Osweiler, Will Fuller, and Lamar Miller stack this week, and you may have to see how that pays out in a tournament situation. Like I said, Will Fuller may be somewhat of an option in cash game, but right now I just don't think he is. I think there's better options, and that's something that I want to mention. Most of these guys that I've mentioned so far in this video are GPP guys, big tournament options. So yeah, just keep that in mind. I usually mention when I think they're somewhat a cash game playable guy. So again, just want to throw that out there. All right, so moving into some tight ends now. The first guy I want to talk about is Travis Kelce. Now again, just be aware of what Jamal Charles is doing, because Jamal Charles, if he plays and he is a full go, he is going to affect every single player on the Chiefs offense, because it's just going to change entirely how they conduct their plays and how the offense is run and just everything. So that said, I still like Travis Kelce. He's projecting really, really well in most of the models that I've looked at. And, Oakland's allowing 16.4 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends right now, which is, that's pretty good for opposing tight ends, obviously. Kelce's had at least 7 targets in every single game this season. He's averaging 10-plus yards per reception in the last 16 games. And again, I have to mention it again, Oakland is still the worst passing defense in the NFL, 330.6 passing yards per game. So again, Kelce is definitely a viable option this week. Again, I'm not crazy about the price, but what can you say? So next up, I have Delanie Walker. Again, I already mentioned him earlier in the Marcus Mariota stack, but just want to put him up here again. I like Delanie Walker a lot. I think it's a good situation for him, and it could be a game where he has a couple of receiving touchdowns. So we'll have to see how that goes. All right, so last but not least, I have the Rams defense, and I don't really have too much on them. I just kind of like the price. I mean, they've had at least one turnover in every single game this season, except last week against the Buffalo Bills, in a game which they lost. So. They're not the best matchup probably this week, but they're definitely somebody I'm going to look at. I'm definitely going to be looking elsewhere in cash games at defense, but right now I definitely like the Rams defense. Okay, so that's going to do it for the video. I just want to give out a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed and given me all the support so far in just these first few weeks that I've been posting these style videos on YouTube. Thank you to everybody who is interested in my opinion, and be sure to share your opinion down below. Feel free to ask me as many questions as you want, and as always, be sure to stay up to date on my Twitter. I keep saying this, but I'm gonna keep trying to tweet out as much info as I can, and kind of updates on guys that maybe things have changed throughout the week. If Jamal Charles does look like he's going to play, I'll probably tweet out and talk about if I want to play Kelce and Maclin in this particular situation and whatnot. I'll probably tweet out some guys that I feel really safe about playing in cash game, because this particular video is a little bit different. Usually I go with some more cash game style players, but in this particular week I actually decided to go with a little bit more GPP style players like I mentioned earlier. So again, just want to give out a big thank you to all the support. So, I hope you guys tune in next week. Be sure to check out my sleeper/value picks video, which will be coming out on Friday. So until then, I'll talk to you guys later.